So this is the third year that we've put on the symposium, and it's amazing because it really did just start with this idea about, hey, what would happen if we had a symposium that's strictly focused on all things access and functional needs related. And at the time that we were talking about it, we had questions about, okay, are people going to show up? Is this an area that's going to bring folks together? 100, 200 people, what are we talking? What does success look like? Well, we've had well over 2,000 registrations for this event. So I think what we continue to see is interest in this and also a need for information, for guidance, for sharing best practices, and for building relationships and really establishing trust between emergency managers and the community. And so we're delighted that we can participate in this forum, where over the next 2 days, we're going to hear all about that. Real life experiences, current initiatives, where from government agencies, local jurisdictions, community-based organizations, and whole community stakeholders. And so it really is a whole of community approach. I do want to take a moment and just recognize that this has been a monumental lift to make this happen. These events, it takes more than a magic wand. And I just want to talk a little bit about our organizers and sponsors. But first off, CalOES, California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. I cannot be more proud to work for an agency that has access and function needs embedded within its DNA. That leadership team were led, of course, by Governor Newsom and our director, Nancy Ward. They are committed to empowering all Californians in this space. I want to thank Sadie Martinez and her team at the Colorado Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. They recognize the need for integration and inclusion and are pushing Colorado forward and trying to lift up others with them, which is wonderful. I want to thank McLaughlin from NYU. She does an incredible job of serving students, staff, faculty, and visitors at NYU in a way that's inclusive and considerate and equitable. And we appreciate her efforts. And of course, we want to thank the International Association of Emergency Managers, John Osborne and the team there do an incredible job. Registrations and platforms and organizing and logistics. Couldn't do this without them. Our sponsors are the Red Cross and big city emergency managers. And I want to thank Trevor Riggin and Ron Prater for their continued effort to push this nationally and to make sure all emergency managers and volunteers are able to participate in a meaningful way. In addition to our sponsors, of course, and our organizers, I just want to thank all of you. This doesn't happen unless you register. And you did, and you're here, and it's appreciated. So we've got a great program for you today. We're going to be talking first. It's a little bit different than the format that we used last year. So last year we had an opening speaker followed by 2 panels. This year we've got a speaker followed by a panel, followed by another speaker. So we think it's a good format. We're excited about it. I'll start with giving some remarks. We'll then move to our panel. And then we'll go from that point. So, and thinking about what to talk about today, I thought, first off, let's talk about the fact that there's been tremendous progress in this area. I'm very grateful for the progress in that area. Gratitude is also important. I've got kids when they're little. I wanted them to learn about gratitude. I've heard a really neat story from Coach John Harbaugh and his brother, famous football coaches, John and Jim. They said that when their dad was raising them, he would say throughout their lives at random times, "Boys, who's got it better than we do?" And they would respond no matter what was going on by saying, "Nobody, right? Nobody's got it better than we do." And he said during good times and bad times, that really helped him to learn to be grateful. So I wanted my kids to do this. I thought it'd be kind of a neat thing. And I remember I sat them down. I explained, "All right, girls, I'm going to ask, who's got it better than we do?" And you're going to say, "Nobody." Got it? Great. Got it. Good. So I asked them, "Girls, who's got it better than we do?" And at the same time, they yelled, "Everybody." I thought, well, that's not what I was going for, but I like to think along the way they figured it out. Throughout the day and throughout the next 2 days, we're going to be talking a lot about access and functional needs. Now, depending on the jurisdiction or the state or even the country that you live in, that term means different things to different people. What we're going with and what I'll be using that term as today aligns with California state statute, which refers to access and functional needs as individuals with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities, but also individuals with chronic conditions, individuals with injuries, those with limited English proficiency, children, older adults, people living in institutionalized settings, those who are low income, homeless, experiencing homelessness, or in late stages of pregnancy, and anyone that's transportation disadvantaged. And no matter where you're from, the following sobering reality is true. But anytime there's a disaster, it's individuals with access and functional needs that are disproportionately impacted by those events. It's individuals with access and functional needs who experience greater suffering and greatest loss of life. And the other reality is this, that individuals with access and functional needs haven't historically been integrated within the process that gets used to plan, prepare, respond, and recover from disasters. So I mentioned that I have 2 daughters. And when they were little, I had this idea that I thought was a really great idea. I thought it was like a Father of the Year type of idea. I was going to pull them from school early and surprise them by taking them to the circus. So what I ended up doing was watching as my wife went in, pulled her from school. I waited in our van. As they were coming towards the van, I kept thinking, what a great idea this is, right? I'm for sure going to get Father of the Year. Like, where am I going to put this trophy? Do I put the trophy at home or at my office? They get in the car and we start driving. And surprise them with the news. Girls, guess where we're going? Of course, they didn't know. Girls, we're going to the circus. And as soon as I said that, they both started crying. And I remember looking at them in the rearview mirror, and they're in the backseat crying. And I couldn't figure out what is happening right now, because this is not at all how I pictured this going in my mind. So I asked, girls, why are you crying? My oldest daughter says, Daddy, today is library day. I was going to get to pick up my favorite book. Please, please, can we go back? My other daughter says, Daddy, I was going to be the team captain at PE. Please, please, can we go back? And I looked at them and said, no, we're going to the circus. And they cried the whole way there. Do you have any idea how much cotton candy I had to buy in order to make that situation better? It was a lot. And I share that because that's been a problem with the way that plans get developed. But you have these wonderful emergency managers, people who run towards danger because they want to help. But they sometimes plan for people instead of with people. And when that happens, it never quite goes the way we picture in our minds. So in California, we wanted to get ahead of that. So to address that in a meaningful way, California's governor leaned forward and created the Office of Access and Functional Needs within his Office of Emergency Services. Now, as chief of the office, I serve as a gubernatorially appointed senior level executive charged with a two-part mission. First, it's to really look and identify what are the needs that all Californians have before, during, and after disasters. And then second, it's to work in partnership with the community and emergency managers to integrate those needs throughout every facet of the emergency management process. I've had the privilege of serving in that capacity since 2015. In that time, thanks to the strong commitment of emergency managers, thanks to the incredible whole community partners, California's made tremendous strides in integration and inclusion. And today, we lead the nation in inclusive planning. But despite our progress, we recognize that there's more work to be done. We recognize that we're not, quote, there, and that we can't hang the mission accomplished banner. And this is especially true because we're living at a time when climate-driven disasters are increasing at a seemingly exponential rate. And what's more is that these disasters, they're not just increasing in number and frequency, but the scope, scale, and devastation associated with those events are increasing too. And so it is that we have to find a way to push emergency management using a whole of community approach towards a safer, more resilient community, where jurisdictions address events using inclusive integrated processes. It becomes especially significant when you're talking about life safety issues, right? Things like, for example, emergency evacuation, which we know is a challenge, right? For individuals who have access or functional needs, who can't drive, or maybe don't own a vehicle, those that rely on public transit or need accessible transportation, emergency evacuation can be devastatingly complex. I've seen it so many times. I'll never forget when my phone rang and I was told that we were activating in response to what we thought was the immediate failure of the Oroville Dam. Now, that dam is the tallest one in the United States. In all my time at Cal OES, I've never seen our state operations center so busy. That night, we worked tirelessly to coordinate the evacuation of just over 188,000 people. It was the largest non-hurricane evacuation in U.S. history. And for some individuals with access and functional needs, it was a nightmare. One of the jurisdictions that was impacted, as part of its emergency operation plan, that outlined a process that would be used to provide accessible transportation and resources to anyone that needed them. Fortunately, nobody had actually told the accessible transportation provider that they were part of the plan. So when the evacuation order went through, the drivers evacuated the area, leaving behind a fleet of accessible vehicles with no one there to operate them. Imagine being in that situation. All reports indicate that a dam failure is going to send a 30-foot wall of water downstream through your community. And because there's no memorialized agreements in place with accessible transportation providers, you have no way of getting out. Meanwhile, your neighbor, who got the same evacuation order at the same time you did, tosses a go bag in her car, hops in her vehicle, and leaves for safety. It should not be the reality anyone faces today. Another time, I was in our state operations center, and this time we were activated in response to wildfires, and my cell phone rang. Now, I don't know exactly how this happens, but my cell number ends up in some pretty interesting places. So I'm sometimes hesitant to answer a call from a number I don't recognize. Of course, during activations, you don't want to miss a thing. So I always do my best to pick up. Well, that night, I answered the phone and heard what could best be described as panic, terror. I listened as a woman told me that she and her husband needed to evacuate but couldn't. They lived on the second floor of an apartment complex. Their husband uses a power wheelchair. The elevator in the building stopped working. And despite his pleading for her to go save herself, she refused to leave his side. Now, they had called 911 for assistance, but they were told that because more transportation resources were needed than what the jurisdiction had access to, she and her husband had no choice but to, quote, wait patiently. Through her tears, I could literally hear the random explosion of propane tanks as the fire approached their location. I took down their information, promised to do whatever I could, hung up the phone, and raced to our partners in the law enforcement operations center to explain the situation. After that, time seemed, at least to me, to move in slow motion. Waiting, staring at my phone, trying to will it to ring, hoping for the update I so desperately wanted to hear. And after what felt like an eternity, my phone finally rang. I answered and heard crying, but this time there were tears of joy. They got us, she said. The police came. They carried my husband out of his wheelchair, lifted him down the stairs, and placed him in the squad car. We're leaving the parking lot. The building is on fire. The second floor, our apartment, it's burning. Flames are everywhere, but we made it. So that phone call could go down as perhaps the single best phone call I ever received. But it should have never been that close. It should have never been in that situation. So my colleagues, my friends, partners, it's time for us to make more meaningful progress on how we address life safety issues, especially things like emergency evacuation, in an inclusive way so that people don't suffer this way, so that lives aren't lost this way. Now, I'm delighted to say that Callaway has recently released an innovative guide to help emergency managers everywhere create integrated emergency evacuation plans. We created it as a scalable blueprint that all jurisdictions can use to turn the page and move on to a more inclusive approach to whole community safety. It's available on our website, and we'll also push it out to all registrants following the symposium. And I get it. We're a state with nearly 40 million people. We're the world's 5th largest economy. Not every state has the same resources or demographics, and we understand that. But again, it's a blueprint, and this guide is scalable. And whether you're in Texas or Vermont, it'll work for you, and it's available for you. We hone in on a few key areas, and I'll just touch on a few really quick. One is just about being inclusive, about the need to establish an access and functional needs advisory committee that you can engage throughout the development of your emergency evacuation plan. Their perspective, this perspective of community members and advocates, people with lived experience, it will help jurisdictions to develop, update, and create better plans that benefit everybody in the community. We talk a lot about in the plan about using accessible communications. Because if there is no sign language interpreter, if the messages that are being posted on social media sites aren't 508 compliant, if what's going out in terms of alerts and notifications don't also include alternate formats, then your evacuation related messaging isn't accessible. It's not going to serve the whole community. If it's only going out in English, entire swaths of the population won't know what's coming, how to prepare, or what actions to take. And if that happens, is it any wonder that there's a disproportionate impact? We talk a lot about in the guide about thinking about the end user, right? So you might have a plan, a wonderful plan, a perfect plan, maybe the greatest plan ever. But if the end user doesn't know how to access the emergency transportation resources that they're going to need to evacuate safely, it's all for naught. Right? Develop a standard operating procedure that individuals with access and functional needs can use to secure accessible transportation before, during, and after events. Socialize it. Use your AFN advisory committee to get that word out. If it's well known, the community will use it. We have to move away from saying, here's a phone number to call to evacuate this wildfire, and then creating a totally different process when it's a flood, or changing the phone number when it's a weather event. We need consistency, and we can do that. Lastly, we talk a lot in the guide about memorializing your agreements, right? Establish formalized signed agreements. Make sure that you look over that and you share those with your AFN advisory committee. Make sure that those memorialized transportation agreements really hold providers accountable. That you're recognizing that you need those agreements with providers in your jurisdiction and in surrounding jurisdictions. That's how you build surge capacity. Make sure that plans are executable 24/7 and at no cost to evacuees. I know that this feels like a lift, and it is a lift. This is not something that is easy, or everybody would have it done by now. But it's something that is possible. You know, every night when I go to bed, through the entire lives of my children, they've seen me do the same thing. I pull up next to the bed. I get picked up out of my wheelchair and transferred into bed. So every night they see me get picked up, moved over, and for them it's just normal. For some reason, my oldest daughter's always been fascinated with this process. And she would say, even from the time maybe she was 3 years old, I'm going to put Daddy to bed. I'm going to pick up Daddy. And she'd wrap her little arms around my leg. She'd go to lift, and my foot would move. And it just was something that I thought would fade, and it never did. She'd get older. I'm getting older. I can pick up Daddy almost. Well, fast forward to COVID. Our family got through COVID in the same way a lot of other families did. We bought a Peloton, which of course, being a power wheelchair user, I didn't get a lot of use out of the Peloton, but my wife and my daughters did. And my oldest daughter used Peloton and the workout app. And one night she says, because I'm getting ready to go to bed, I am putting Daddy to bed tonight. And I looked and saw what I think can best be described as a determined look on my 16-year-old's face that said to me, this is happening. So I looked at my wife and we crossed our fingers and hoped for the best. And I pulled my wheelchair up next to the bed. And this kind, beautiful young lady wraps her arms around me. And we say, 1, 2, 3, lift, and nothing happened. It turned out my seatbelt was still on, and it worked. I did not move. I didn't budge an inch. So I said, all right, shake it off. No problem. Took off my seatbelt. She wrapped her arms around me and we said, 1, 2, 3, lift. And she picked me up out of my wheelchair, carried me to the bed, laid me down, and as soon as she knew I was safe, looked me in my eyes, and we both started crying. And it, for me, was not just about that amazing love that a father and a daughter have. It was about the fact also that I knew how hard she'd worked. I knew that she had set a very bold goal, that it was something she wanted to do that seemed impossible at the time, but she pushed for it, she worked for it, and she got there. So look, when it comes to more inclusive plans, when it comes to integrated operations, when it comes to emergency evacuation, set bold goals. It may take time, but if you push, you will get there. And you'll lift, and I'll lift with you. And as I said on other occasions, you lift, I lift, we lift, and together our communities ascend. So thank you for letting me spend some time with you. Thank you for letting me tell my tales. I am delighted now to transition over to the next part of our program. And what we're going to have is the incredible Anne-Marie McLaughlin, Director of Emergency Management and Continuity at New York University, but moderate and lead a fantastic panel discussion on effective emergency communication. Anne-Marie, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Vance. Sadie, do you need a minute to coordinate any of the interpreters captioning? Okay. Let us know when we can start again. Inclusion is important to us, and we will not start until we have everything in place so that everybody can truly participate and engage with the material. Sadie, would you let us know when you're ready or what the issues are? Captioners, please do a test. Good to go? All righty, we're good to go. Excellent, good to hear. Well, again, thanks to Vance for a truly moving keynote. And again, this is such an important topic, inclusion generally and communication specifically. So I'm really excited to be moderating the panel on effective communication in emergency management. And really, it is vital to emergency messaging. If information is not accessible or cannot be understood, it cannot be acted on. We have a fabulous panel with us today. They're going to help us think through emergency communication and inclusion. Our panelists, if you would like to turn your cameras on, they're going to help us think through emergency communications, and they're going to share the tools, resources, and methods being used to ensure that verbal and electronic emergency messages can be used to further preparedness, response, and recovery throughout the whole community. I'm going to briefly introduce each of them, and we are going to have a conversation, really. This is not, if you're familiar with these symposiums, we do not do PowerPoint slides. We handle this like a conversation, and we really want to talk through some of the issues that we are thinking about. So to start with the introductions, Elizabeth Bubel is a Senior Associate of Community Preparedness Programs at the American Red Cross, the national headquarters. She brings more than 15 years of experience in nonprofit program management and development, both nationally in the US and overseas. She's been with the American Red Cross since 2015 and is program manager for the Red Cross Emergency app, which launched in May of 2022. The app empowers a diverse public to prepare, respond, and recover from climate-driven hazards. We're also joined by Jan Garrett. She serves as the Deputy Director of ADA Programs for the Pacific ADA Center at the Public Health Institute. She has over 25 years of experience providing guidance and training on the ADA and other disability rights laws for businesses, state and local governments, emergency management professionals, architects, people with disabilities, and others. As a person with a lived experience of disability who uses a wheelchair, Jan has a deeply personal understanding of why disability civil rights are so important. We also are pleased to have Angel Perez, the Digital Accessibility Coordinator in the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Angel plays a central role in the development and delivery of Cal OES's employee training on the laws and techniques that enable effective communication within electronic information. Angel teaches courses on such topics as basic steps to create accessible documents and forms in Microsoft Word, Excel, and PDF. And last but not least, Noah Ryder. He's the Director of Customer Success for Motorola Solutions, where he and his team are responsible for empowering customers to impact emergency response, critical communications, and community safety through technology. Noah has previously served in various public sector and public safety roles, including Assistant City Manager for the City of Sandy Springs, Georgia, EMS Director for Grady Health System in Atlanta, and as the Director of EMS Security Emergency Preparedness for Lenox Hill Hospital here in New York City. I know him through our connections with Rave Wireless, the ENS provider, and we'll get to that in a moment, but it's great to welcome this panel to our discussion today. And I wanted to start out with Jan Garrett because When I think as an emergency manager, very often we learn through our mistakes as we are trying to communicate with the whole community. And just wanted to get your perspective as somebody with lived experience. What do you think are the most common errors in communicating with the disability community through a disaster? Jen, you're muted.
Sorry, I was unmuted a moment ago. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here with this great panel and with you. Thank you so much for the question, Anne Marie. So I think there are potentially many errors. Obviously, for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, communicating to make sure that there is captioning and sign language interpreters, both whenever possible. If it's only a text communication, to make sure that it's as brief as possible and very, very clear about what is expected for people to do. And that will also help people with other disabilities and generally help everyone. It's kind of a universal design of communication of, being clear, telling people what they should do, telling them where they should go, telling them what transportation may be available, telling them if there's a specific shelter they need to go to, telling them that, or telling them they can shelter in place. So giving them the information they really need for this particular emergency or disaster so that they can feel safe and that they can know what to do next, because they may have a plan, but they may not really know exactly how to implement that plan for different kinds of disasters and emergencies. So clear, simple communication in a variety of ways, as much as possible, is what I would really say for people with disabilities and everyone.
Definitely, definitely. And Elizabeth or Liz, you prefer Liz?
Liz is great.
Liz, I have to say you developed, or your team developed the emergency app, the Red Cross emergency app. How does this app help make communications for people with disabilities, access, or functional needs clearer and more in line with what Jan is describing?
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on the panel. We built our app around, thanks so much for your introduction. The emergency app is a free all hazard app. It's available in English and Spanish. It's designed with accessibility in mind and aims to empower a diverse public before, during, and after disaster. We built this app around people, our core audiences. We want to be the app of choice for people disproportionately impacted by disaster. That's why we designed it around our core audiences. People with access and functional needs, including individuals with disabilities. We offer an accessible experience as we aim to achieve the Web Content 2.2 AA guidelines. The app is also available in Spanish with an easy to find language toggle, and full weather alerts in Spanish and English accompanied by just-in-time safety information. We aim to serve people with low level of literacy. So our content is written at a 6th to 7th grade reading level, and we aim to transform highly technical preparedness content into easily digestible information that everyone can understand. We want to be the app of choice for people with a low level of income. So the prep content is relevant and achievable for everyone, and we're not telling people to do things that are very expensive. So that's a little bit about us, but basically with our app, we do aim to achieve those guidelines, Web Content Accessibility 2.2 AA guidelines, and we've embraced, in all stages of software development, we've really embraced this accessibility. We've embedded accessibility into all stages of our development, and I can talk a little bit about that later, but it's very important to us. It's our North Star.
That's great. It's great to hear about that, and we will get into more detail, as we discuss inclusive emergency communication. Having an app is so important, and understanding what the community needs is difficult, right? And Sadie and Vance and others often talk about planning with and not for, and understanding what constitutes inclusive information. And, you know, so Angel, you work for Cal OES, and in your, you provide classes to help emergency managers and others to understand how to provide clear, concise, inclusive information. Could you tell us about the class that you offer?
Yeah, of course. And it's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Thanks for asking about the classes. I do offer 3 classes every month for free. They are offered monthly, focusing on making documents accessible. I cover creating Microsoft Office documents from Microsoft Word and Excel, highlighting similar tools across all Microsoft products, including Outlook. We have a 2-day class for PDF documents, teaching how to test for accessibility and fix any issues. Additionally, we offer a class on creating forms. It's one of its own kind with accessible elements in Microsoft Word, Excel, and PDF documents, and how to make those accessible to people within our communities. These classes are crucial because, as Vance mentioned, accessible information can save lives, especially during emergencies and during certain situations when disasters occur. For example, making a document about what to do during this heat wave, right? Accessible ensures everyone, including those with screen readers, can access the vital information. For classes, our classes provide an understanding of accessibility basics, practical steps for creating accessible documents, and advanced techniques. And they benefit everyone from governmental agencies to local community-based organizations across California. And even if you're not in California, we welcome you. We believe that everyone should have the tools to create accessible documents, ensuring that no one is left behind.
Thank you, Angel. And we've got a lot of interest here in the Q&A. Again, I know that there may be some raised hands, but if you have questions, the Q&A is the best way to get your question put to the forefront. Everybody's very interested in the Red Cross app. And what is the official name of it, Liz?
Yeah, it's the emergency app. It's available on iOS and Android devices. You can search American Red Cross in your app stores. We do have features to help you before, during, and after disaster. Before, we offer short guides to help you prepare for 13 hazards, help with making customized plans. And new this year, we offer games to practice prep skills. During the disaster, you can program the app to give you to choose between over 46 different NOAA weather alerts. We offer free radar maps so you can keep up to date, and a hurricane tracker, which we used all week with Beryl. I can tell you we were glued to that app watching Beryl. And you can also, new this year, you can also monitor the EPA's air quality index. After disaster, we're really, really excited. We display open Red Cross shelters in our app, and as well as services available near you. We really did put people with disabilities front and center as we looked at the app. You know, we've embedded accessibility into all stages. We've embraced what we call a shift left concept so that we can, as we design the app, we can catch accessibility errors very early. This involves doing accessibility reviews while we're still working on paper so that we can course correct. We also conduct comprehensive accessibility assessments twice a year with a third party to gauge our conformance with accessibility standards and then fix as we needed. We also involve people with disabilities through inclusive design studies so that we really can understand their needs and preferences and make improvements to the app based on their feedback. Some ways we've improved the app based on the direct feedback of people with disabilities is that open Red Cross shelters. So people using screen readers told us, hey, my screen reader is having difficulty with your map interface. We want that information in list view as well as map view. Can you make sure and so we did that. We also are in the process of switching out our stock images because when we did inclusive design studies with people with cognitive disabilities, they let us know that, hey, we want to take your preparedness content, but it's quite, the stock images are overwhelming to us. Can you do digital illustrations? And so we're just in the process of wrapping up that project, and those digital illustrations will be published in the coming months. But we're really excited, and thank you so much.
Sounds like, and I'm sure folks are downloading it as we're having this discussion now, which is fabulous. And, it's so funny, Angel's talking about making, we all think about PDFs and Word documents. And, if we are, unsure, it can be difficult to know, is this an accessible PDF? I have sent accessible PDFs to Valerie Haven, who's a dear friend and consultant. I think she's in the audience here, to see, is this accessible? Angel, I'm seeing, somebody's asking in the Q&A, can we sign up for these classes? And I also think, if there are emergency managers on this webinar who are interested in your content, and are you willing to share content, or can people attend your classes outside of the state of California? How does that work?
Of course, absolutely. They can sign up to these classes because they're virtual. So each class is offered monthly. They're free, and so it's definitely more accessible than most other classes. Open to anyone who's interested. The sign up, you just go to the CSTI website at ca.csod.com. In the website, you're able to select browse trainings and look at the training of how to create accessible Office documents. That's the first prerequisite class. Of course, these classes do have prerequisites, because it first starts with getting and creating a document from maybe an Office document and learning how to create with those tools. Following those classes, you can take the how to create accessible PDF documents, sign up for those dates, and how to create accessible forms. Yeah, you can be from elsewhere. I especially do encourage for emergency managers. Users in CSTI website do need to sign in and provide contact information to sign up. But I believe, yeah, it's good information, so that way we can reach out to you and have you into the class. So yeah.
Fabulous. And Tim, I don't know if you can add the link to the chat if possible. And Jan, I see your hand is raised, and then we'll go to Noah.
Thank you, Anne Marie. That was just exactly what I was going to ask. That was kind of a long web link that Angel gave. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I followed that. So I wondered if somebody could put that in the chat. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you so much, Angel. So we're talking about things like making PDFs and documents accessible. We're also talking about innovation, right? A brand new app. And I know Noah does amazing work over there for Motorola. And I've heard you and Vance refer to enhanced alerting. Could you share with the audience a bit more about this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely, Anne Marie. And thanks, just echoing the other panelists. It's really a pleasure to be invited to participate in the panel. And I'm taking notes, just like I'm sure everybody else out there is. I'm learning a lot in the process, so it's always fun to contribute whatever I can, but also absorb what I can as well. So to be clear, I have nothing to do with coding the technology that Rave and Motorola has to offer, but I do, in my role in customer success, have the opportunity to work with the likes of Anne Marie and Vance Taylor and loads of other folks across North America to help power many of the things that Jan and Liz and Angel are talking about, right? Like, technology is obviously a critical component to effective communication. And that's, part of what we do. So enhanced alerting is really our collaboration with Cal OES and Vance Taylor and folks that he works with in the community in particular, to try to harness what I believe is sort of the right spirit behind what we would all kind of know as a traditional access and functional needs registry, and move beyond the pitfalls associated with an AFN registry. I'm sure folks who are way closer to the AFN community, or maybe even be a member of that community yourself, who's attending today's session, some might debate the intent behind an AFN registry. I believe, sort of optimistic view, glass half full, the intent, I think, is right. It's more information is better, to be able to equip emergency managers and their partners to better prepare for, ultimately respond to, and recover from a disaster or other event. However, I think, as we would all also agree, there are some pitfalls, right? Something that's intended to serve the community, unfortunately, isn't inclusive. It singles out, it excludes folks. Because of that, it doesn't instill the right degree of trust and confidence in the communities that folks are hoping to serve. And it also potentially excludes individuals who might not identify as having an access or functional need, but have additional needs or considerations that would be important for emergency management officials to be made aware of. So there's this weird sort of dichotomy. So what we tried to do in partnership with Cal OES was, look, we have this technology that can collect information and that can allow emergency managers to effectively communicate and tailor communications to different segments of the community. But the trick is, you've got to have people participate, right? So how do we instill that trust and confidence? And so again, in collaboration with members of the community and representatives of the AFN community, we really tried to get to the heart of, like, what's preventing trust. And it's a couple of things, right? It's like, well, don't single us out, right? That makes us feel different. It doesn't speak to inclusion. It actually speaks to exclusion. So by coupling it with some other initiatives in California and elsewhere in the country, it really is available to everybody. It's coupled with, it's not a standalone registry. It's coupled with an emergency messaging platform. It also ties into additional information that can be provided with a 911 call, so that when our customers, our partners, market it, promote it to their communities, leverage different trusted voices and channels within the community to promote it, it's for everybody. Because just because I might not have an access or functional need or additional consideration, I still want 911 and first responders to know about me, my family, where I live, how to access my home, things like that. So we made it more inclusive. We also de-identified the information. So, our Rave, who was acquired by Motorola about 1.5 years ago, had what really looked and smelled like a traditional access and functional needs registry, and we've offered it for 10+ years. One of the features is allowing an emergency manager to actually not just alert certain segments of their community with this highly tailored messaging, but also download reports, names, addresses, things that folks in the community are obviously sensitive to the government having access to, right? So we de-identified that. We limited an emergency manager's ability to drill down to the person, to the individual level, and really aggregated the data. And then the real shift here was equipping emergency managers not with a tool to drill down again to the individual level, but look at information in aggregate. So as Jan said in her opening remarks, it's critical to provide brief, concise, actionable messaging, but it's also got to be timely, right? So really the concept of enhanced alerting is, trust us with your information because we've de-identified it. We're not going to do anything nefarious with it. I'm now speaking as an emergency manager, right? And in return, we're going to provide you with earlier warning, more timely warning, because we recognize that certain segments of the community are going to require additional time to take action, whether it's evacuation, sheltering in place, preparing for a power outage, so on and so forth. So really, it's the shift to better messaging. And then there's another pitfall that, I think I became aware of through these conversations we've had over the past year or so. And it's that a registry creates a false set of expectations, right? A false set of expectations, both within the community, that if I just sign up for this thing, I'm good to go. I don't need to worry about personal preparedness. From the emergency manager's perspective, I have a registry. As long as I take care of the needs or fulfill the needs for the folks who register, which, by the way, we all recognize is going to be a small percentage of the population, even if we're doing well in a community, there's then this false set of expectations we set for emergency management, and unfortunately maybe set them up for failure. So by focusing it differently and reiterating the need for personal preparedness, resilience, and on blue sky days, we may leverage the system, or our partners may leverage the system to provide preparedness tips. Maybe it's to download the Red Cross app, the emergency app, or something else, right? So it's really a shift in mindset, right? De-identified view, trust, inclusion, not exclusion, and then earlier, more timely warning for individuals who frankly just need more time.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's so interesting to hear just this as a new development. I was going to move to Jan, and I don't know if you have a response or if you have a reaction to this new development. As somebody, you had mentioned previously that you need notice, right? Or people generally need notice for notification. Registries are always a topic of interest and discussion. I was just curious to know your reaction to this new idea.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think it's really important to give notice and give people with disabilities and other access and functional needs as much time as possible to make sure that, that they are safe, during all hazards. But it's also the other thing that I don't think I heard mentioned, and maybe I missed it, was that when you create an access and functional needs registry, you need to assure the people that are on that registry about its security. Because even if you de-identify the addresses and emails and other kinds of things, it's still an access and functional needs registry, and someone who does have nefarious designs on that can go to it and say, oh gosh, I'm going to just try to start hitting these people on this list. So I feel like the security of that list, and we all know what happens when banks get hacked and corporations get hacked, and they have all our personal information, and that is a really, I would think that people might have a really big concern about that. But I agree with Noah that the getting as much information as possible, both as somebody with access and functional needs, and for the emergency managers to have as much information as possible, to know where people are, but also to be able to put out the messages that, the police and fire aren't coming for you necessarily. If there's an earthquake, you need to be prepared and do X, Y, and Z. Giving people realistic, timely, specific messages is really, really important. But, I just want to highlight that security, telling people about the security, should be really a priority as well.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I did not call that out in my remarks. But yes, security is paramount. And as we discuss it in the community, we also share with them security measures that are in place, because yeah, it's critical, and folks have to trust that whatever they're providing, whatever they're willing to provide, is in as safe hands as possible.
It's a great point, and the technology is so important, right? The technology, Noah, you talked about building trust with the community, and the trust isn't just somebody has a good heart. The trust is also that the technology works and is inclusive. And whenever, as somebody, as an emergency manager, we deal with vendors all the time, and talking about online training, making sure it's inclusive. Do they even understand what it means to be inclusive? And I thought I would ask Liz, as you're developing this app, how were you, if someone's looking to create an app or, endeavor to do something that is technical and meant for the whole community, how did you go about developing this app to be sure that it's truly inclusive and that the technology works for everyone?
Thanks so much. I think, number one is involving people with access and functional needs, including disabilities, in your in your planning efforts, right? Put the audiences you wish to reach front and center in your strategic plan, so that they don't become a tack on or afterthought. So as you do your goals and objectives, make sure that you have those audiences front and center so that you're really are working towards providing excellence for each segment. I would say, put it in the contract, compliance with a particular WCAG, or which one. We have WCAG 2.2 AA in our contracts, right? I would say that don't rely on the vendor themselves. Get a report card from a third party to evaluate how the app is performing or your technology is performing. They can give you very detailed reports. They give you, we do twice yearly, we do an audit of the emergency app in iOS and Android. And then we get a report card, right? And it tells you what critical issues, what high issues, what medium, what issues, what low issues. And then you can course correct, right? So technology is changing so much that you really do have to bake this into the process, so that you can catch errors early, and really take action. The shift left concept that I was talking about has been transformative for me, because basically we've been able to get our third party to help us looking at design docs while we're still on paper, so that we can course correct, because the vendor had to come up to speed with accessibility, with all the ins and outs of accessibility. We had to bring our developers up to speed with what that means. And then in October, there was a new accessibility. We went to 2.2 AA, and so we had to make sure everyone knew what that was all about. Making sure that you're working slowly, you're working hand in hand with the developer. We have a third party that we use that's been great. When you do get your report card, I would say you get your accessibility audit and you find out all the bad news, right? Learn from that, dive into it, get really into what they're voluminous reports, but you can understand them. Where we were able to really push the needle on accessibility, I think, is the inclusive design studies that we did with people with disabilities. We did 3 cohorts, and we were able to actually, have people use the app, give us their reactions, preferences, where they were experiencing. This is beyond WCAG, so this is more qualitative, but we want to provide excellent service, and we want it to be led by what they're saying, right? So, we learned a lot. We learned a lot by that experience. They told us what their pain points were. We were then able to say, hey, that's a pain point for this segment. Let's improve it. Let's take that on. And the maps tab was just something that, really blew my mind away, because I was thinking, here we are, we're open in these communities, we're displaying all this information of where you can find shelter at the American Red Cross. And I thought by default that information was consumable by everybody. And it wasn't until we heard from our inclusive design study, the people with disabilities, and they said, this is great, but you need that in list view. And now every time someone's showing me a map or something on ArcGIS, or I'm like, is it in list view too? Because I learned the hard way. We were able to make that. And honestly, now when I look at the app, and every day I have to check to make sure the app's functioning well. I have to check the shelters are displaying in map view and list view. I always go back to the list view, and I'm like, gosh, I like that view better too. Like I can crosswalk easily. you know, those are some techniques that I would use. I would say that if you have minimal amount of money, and we do at the American Red Cross, we're always scrimping and saving, but I would say that, you know, take the money you have, you know, divide it up and say, you know, I can't be my own evaluator. I need a third party. There's people that can do that for low cost. You know, get in the swing. If you can't afford to host inclusive design studies, you can hold focus groups with people with disabilities. You can have them use your technology and see what they say. You'll learn a lot that way, right? By listening, by understanding where their barriers are. But that would be my advice. Thank you.
Super helpful, super helpful. I'm gonna share the NYU, our some of our guidance resources that we use. And I know, you know, when we're talking about making technology accessible, you know, as emergency managers, we may be sending alerts out, you know, using different modalities. We're also on social media a lot, right? Trying to reach the public through social media. And Angel, I know you are developing a new class focused on making social media accessible. Right now, I have alt text on photos and graphics. I think I'm on the right track, but there's probably a lot more that I don't know about. So could you tell us a little bit about this class and what your aims are?
Of course. Yeah, we're very excited about this new addition to add, and this is, I mean, social media is a crucial tool for communication, especially during emergencies. We've been using it a lot during emergencies, and you know, there've been some really great messaging going out that is accessible, and then there's some that, you know, it could be better to reach our communities. Our new class will teach participants how to ensure their social media content is accessible to everyone, including those with disabilities. This is particularly important in emergencies when timely and clear information can make a huge difference. So we want to empower people to create inclusive content that reaches everyone when it matters most. So this class will be available soon, and we encourage everyone to join us in making social media more accessible. So yeah, that's coming up. We still haven't had a specific dates or training times, but that's coming up soon. Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit more in terms of, you know, ways that, because right now it's causing me just a little bit of anxiety. Are we doing anything now with our social media that may not be inclusive? We've got the alt text. Are there other considerations?
Yeah, so each social media you can add alt text. There's also other considerations like plain language. There's a couple trainings going out currently right now to just be shared about plain language to make your messaging more accessible, more clear. There's definitely more into also just, you know, what to add in a map, things like that, as Elizabeth was mentioning. So definitely having like a list or something of the areas and making sure that's also included in your messaging. And links, hyperlinks, knowing how to provide those hyperlinks on those social media applications as well. Make sure they're working correctly. So that's a big plus. And other than that, you're good to go. But we definitely are going to have more examples, more emojis, things like that of how to make them accessible and things like that.
Yeah, because emojis can be a difficulty on accessibility as well. So
yeah. Great. And
Sure.
right now, currently, I mean, I think everyone's been doing a great job messaging because these platforms are a little bit more, you know, they don't let you change the font and things like that to keep it a little bit more accessible, but there could be better. And again, learning about the plain language and things like that with social media definitely will go a long way.
So I'm scrolling through the Q&A here, lots of great questions. I am thinking that, Vance, there's a lot of interest in registries. So I think, you know, in terms of topics for, you know, for other panels, that definitely is emerging as a topic of interest. Keeping within the scope of communications, there are a number of questions regarding power outages, communication tower lines being downed. I think I'm going to pitch this to Noah as the tech expert here, the tech person. I'll just read the question. I understand every emergency disaster is different, but in a disaster where communication tower lines are destroyed or disconnected, how do individuals receive notifications and/or warnings if those lines don't work?
Yes. Wonderful question. Not a simple answer, I don't think. Obviously there's a lot of infrastructure required for, some of the technology that not only we provide, but others in the space provide as well. And, if critical infrastructure is interrupted, it makes communication challenging, to say the least. And certainly folks in California and elsewhere have experienced that firsthand. I would say if we take like maybe one step back, just prior to an infrastructure disruption, the concept of multimodality is always critical, right? So just generally speaking, we all know this, different people receive messages or prefer to receive communication in through different channels, languages, so on and so forth, as we've already discussed. So ensuring that when infrastructure is available, critical infrastructure is available, and technology can be leveraged, that you're leveraging all channels available, right? So that's first and foremost. When there's a disruption impacting cell towers, for example, that's a tricky situation that I don't think any technology can solve for, right? So developing, and here's where I'll get out of technology, because the question implies that technology is no longer available. This is really where community resilience has to come into play, right? Neighbors helping neighbors, first responders getting out there and doing what they can do in a mobile fashion, a little bit more one-to-one. It is not efficient. That's why technology exists, right? So it's challenging, but developing community partners, ensuring that public safety agencies aren't trying to go at it alone, and really leveraging stakeholders in the community that can expand and extend the reach of emergency management and public safety is going to be critical in those situations. But clearly there's not an easy answer for communicating when those modes of communication are interrupted.
Thank you. No, and it's a tough question, right? When we talk about personal preparedness and the importance of, helping folks prepare in terms of, having supplies and being ready and, considering it a planning assumption. It may be possible. This might happen. How would I manage that? Great, excellent questions in the Q&A. Thinking about all of the great work that folks here and also attendees and others are doing in the field. There's a lot of effort involved, and it's fabulous to be hearing about all of these great new innovations. There may be some who say, you know what, ADA requirements are suspended during a disaster. We don't need to. Why are we doing all of this? This is hard, right? This is very difficult work. And we might hear this. I'm going to ask Jan. Jan, is it true? Is it even true that ADA requirements are suspended? And, how should we think about this?
Well, no, actually, Anne Marie, it's not true that communication requirements are suspended in any kind of hazard or disaster. And think about that just for a moment. If you're a person with access and functional needs, a person with communication needs in particular, but other needs as well, how does that make you feel to say you're suspended during a disaster? Because that's essentially what people are saying when they're saying, well, isn't ADA suspended during a disaster? Your civil rights, your access to what you need at that very critical time of a disaster and hazard, that can't be suspended. People with disabilities, older adults, people who don't have a lot of money, all these folks need even more access to communication, to other information during a disaster. So the ADA is a civil rights law. It is never suspended, ever, at any time. And it does have, in addition to many other facility access requirements that a lot of people may be aware of, it also has effective communication requirements. And that is to be able to communicate with people with a variety of disabilities. Like we've been talking about, using plain language and being able to communicate with people who may have intellectual or developmental disabilities, or just whose first language is not English. Sometimes people with who have deaf and hard of hearing, their language may not be the same as it is with a with what do I want to say? Basically with other means of communication. So it's important to understand that ADA is not suspended, and that there are means of communication, including people that need to be standing in front of the camera if there is a broadcast announcement about what's happening with the disaster. So you need to make sure that the camera is focused not only on the speaker and on any extra, materials that they're standing there with, but also on the interpreter that may be interpreting what they're saying, and make sure that that camera doesn't move away from that interpreter if there is an announcement on television. So that's part of effective communication, in addition to all the technology pieces that hopefully will be operating during the disaster as well.
Super helpful answer. And it kind of connects to a question that I'm seeing in the Q&A about, how do we operationalize accessible communication during activations? And you just mentioned some of that. And I was going to sort of see if anybody else on the panel had ideas or suggestions, making sure that we are operationalizing accessible communications during the emergency. Liz, Noah, Angel?
One thing that we found really helpful is, as part of our preparedness guides, we want to give people the bad news, the impact of the hazard, and then what they can do before, what they should think through during, and then what to expect after, right? And this is kind of, how we think about empowering people with information. We started about 3 or 4 years ago, our preparedness content, putting it through readable.com, and basically trying to understand our language level, our reading level, right? And really understanding, wow, just that adverb makes that reading level go up so high, right? Like, I mean, you think you're saying something in a simple way that would be translated and things like that in Spanish for our instance, but we spent a lot of time with our preparedness content, kicking it around, putting it through Readable, redoing it again. And this is not just in time. This is, preparedness content is published in the app. But I learned so much about just how to write in a way that was at a lower level of literacy. But then research indicates that if you are writing something like this, these are heavy topics, right? These are heavy topics. If you are writing something at a lower level of literacy, it actually is more understandable by everybody, right? It's more understandable by everybody, even people with, college degrees and PhDs and things like that, because what you're sort of putting in front of them is really life safety kind of issues, right? And if you're cogent, simple, using language that doesn't have any technical, acronyms and all the technical stuff, and being very careful about the language choice to make sure that it's not multisyllabic and it's short as can be, but it still conveys what you want it to convey. I just learned so much out of that process, and I feel like that to me was a way that we could make sure that whatever we were putting in the app was understandable by as wide a group as possible. So that's a technique that I've embraced, learned a lot from, and I really do think, you know, you think, oh, it's simple, you know, put it in readable and see what they say, you know what I mean?
And people keep in mind that people are under stress during a disaster. So even people who might be able to read at a PhD level, like Elizabeth was explaining, when they're under stress, they just really need it clear. And I need exactly what I need, and I need it in a timely way, and I need it really clear because I am stressed. So keep that in mind.
Definitely, definitely. No, over the years, you know, we've been involved I've been involved with RAVE as, you know, university emergency manager. We use, you know, RAVE for alerting folks. And I know that, you know, they get a lot of feedback from customers. What have you learned over the years regarding, you know, operationalizing inclusion in alerting or best practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's many of the things that we just heard of, you know, certainly, or heard about, you know, understanding not just language differences, but comprehension levels, and keeping things, as Jan said, I think, again, in her opening, simple, clear, to the point, actionable is key. But, you know, certainly we've, you know, over the years, as others, you know, have further enhanced translation capabilities and providing subscribers or members of your community with selecting language preferences as one example, so that messages are delivered ideally in a way that the end user, the recipient, can comprehend. You know, obviously there are a lot of automated language translation tools that are embedded into technology. I don't think any of us would argue that those are perfect. Hopefully better than nothing at all, but one of the best practices is certainly, you know, and I'm speaking specifically to languages, different languages here, partnering with folks who are native speakers to template, pre-record as much as possible, so that in a pinch, you're not trying to either rely on auto translation or trying to chase the one or two native language speakers down that you have a relationship with. You know, certainly if time permits and it's a new message for a new scenario that you hadn't templatized previously, if time allows, trying to ask a native speaker to validate or improve upon any auto translation that was done is key. But again, a lot of this is technology, a lot of it is practice, and most of it is relationship.
Definitely, definitely. No, very, you know, this is all very helpful, and I'm just scanning through the Q&A and just noting as we go along, there's a lot of good content being shared. I just wanted to note that if you missed something, we will be providing links to resources offered. A lot of people want to sign up for your classes, Angel, so you'll find some classrooms. Just wanted to, you know, we're talking about the technology and making sure that people have access to messages, but we're also thinking about the content. And Jan, as a person, you know, with lived experience of disability, what information do you need? Let's say there's a shelter that is being opened, and your local emergency management office is communicating with you about the fact that this shelter, we're opening this shelter. What do you recommend including? What do you need to know?
Well, for me, with my particular disability, I have a mobility disability. I was born missing all four of my limbs. So I also have limited, I don't have any hand dexterity, and I do dexterity in different ways. So I would say, I mean, first and foremost, and I would say this is an overarching principle: plan, 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 include people with access and functional needs in your planning, in every stage of your planning. have people tell you what they think of your communication, what they think about the accessibility of your shelters, what they think about the transportation that might be provided for people, because you need to have these agreements in advance, and you need to have this planning in advance, to Noah's point and Elizabeth's point as well. And so make those MOUs, those agreements with transportation providers, with centers for independent living in the community who might be able to help with some of these issues. And make sure that you're giving information about which are the most accessible shelters in the different areas, that you're not sending everyone with a disability to one quote unquote medical shelter. That is not something that the ADA would want in terms of integration and inclusion of everyone with disabilities. You need to make sure that as many shelters, if you have a shelter issue, as many shelters across the community are accessible, that you are allowing people with their attendants to come into the shelter. So I would need to know, can I bring my attendant? Can I bring my husband into this shelter? Is it a family shelter? Because my husband assists me with most of my personal care. What will happen in terms of transportation when I need to get there? Will there be accessible transportation for me to get to that shelter? And how far away is it? So it's really, really critical that you plan for all of this, and that you have your agreements with other organizations that you need to.
Thank you, Jan. And this makes me think about Angel and the classes that you offer, that Cal OES offers, in terms of how emergency managers should think about shelters, resources, family assistance centers, et cetera. Does what Jan mentioned, does what she described sound like, what finds its way into the content of your courses?
Yeah, planning is a part of it. I want to say, I just had a training just recently, and everybody talked about how important templates are. Having those templates ready to go, so that way you can deliver that message that is already accessible. All those images in your templates are already with alt text and things like that. And yeah, that comes across with the trainings of documents. It also comes across now, with just sharing information and emails and things like that, making sure that you address that. The transportation is also one important key when it comes to shelters. So all that information is a must that comes across.
No, definitely. And, we really can't be inclusive without engaging the community. And when we think about, community, city emergency managers in general, reaching out to community organizations, it's expected, right? We need to be engaging with the whole community, as we say. For vendors, for tech companies, communication companies, how is it different? Noah, how do you engage with community stakeholders and get the kinds of feedback that you need to provide the services that folks need?
Yeah, sure. So we'll typically do that via our customer or our partner rather than engaging directly. Certainly, we will engage directly at the customer or our partner's invitation. But really, what we try to do is help equip our, I'll use the term customer and partner interchangeably here, but like equip our customers with best practices from across our expansive user base for what works, right? I think there is a bit of a tendency for community engagement to be a bit of a grind for emergency managers, right? Because it's a heavy lift. A ton of effort goes into, and I don't need to tell you all here, a ton of effort is required to effectively engage a community. And if you have, if the engagement and outreach activities are centered around getting people to adopt your emergency messaging platform, you actually have almost a real-time gauge to provide feedback with how your efforts are or how well they're penetrating the community, right? And because all of us involved in emergency management and partnering with emergency managers are, I think, hard on ourselves and have high expectations, there's no amount of community adoption that ever feels like it's good enough, right? So I think recognizing that is important, like recognition is key, but then also understanding that you cannot, as an emergency management agency or an emergency manager, many of whom are part-time, by the way, right? Like not every jurisdiction, institute of higher education, so on and so forth, has the luxury of funding even one full FTE to focus on emergency management. Even for those that do, or for those who have a small army of folks focused on emergency management, those entities cannot and will not be as successful as they can if they try to engage the community on their own, right? Even if you could knock on every door, the person on the other side of the door doesn't know who you are. They don't necessarily trust you. You're not their trusted voice. You might not look like them. You might not speak their language. You may not have their same lived experiences. So one of the keys to success, there are many, but one of them is sort of, again, back to my comment about relationships, establishing relationships with community stakeholders who are the trusted voice for your community, and convincing them to trust you and of the virtues of your endeavors so that they will in turn promote them to individuals that they represent or have a shared voice with. So that's key. It's super cliche to say, but I will say the following: don't let a good disaster go to waste. That is when people who aren't thinking every day like an emergency manager, or maybe someone with a disability or a member of the access and functional needs community, oh, what if there's a disaster? I need to prepare. People pay more attention when, you know, the hurricane is in the Gulf and a day or two away. Those opportunities are critical to seize upon for driving community engagement, preparedness, in this case, opting into an emergency notification system, as well as sort of coupling and dovetailing those engagement activities with existing awareness campaigns, whether it's, you know, National Preparedness Month or National Night Out, or, you know, basically meet your community where they are, right? Through whatever channels can help you get there. Those are key. And then I think just recognizing that community engagement adoption in these systems is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And just working it into every message every day that you're putting out into the community and that your partners are will yield results.
No, that's a great response. And you know, I'm just looking at the chat here as we're talking, and you know, we do focus on technology, and somebody in the chat is saying many of our, sorry, not the chat, the Q&A, many of our AFN community members do not have internet access or smartphones to begin with, which makes communication efforts quite challenging. And I don't know, Liz, when you were developing the app, if you had any pushback or anybody, you know, pointing this out. I don't know if you have a response to this, but what about folks who don't have smartphones or may have literacy? I don't know if that's a question for Liz or Jan or both, but I thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah, I can look back at some of the studies. I think the Pew Research Council did a number of studies to gauge smartphone ownership in the United States, and how many people do have smartphones and use them. Certainly we do know that there's a digital divide in the country, that not everyone has access to a smartphone, and that not everyone has access to a, you know, paid plan. We see a lot of people that with the Wi-Fi phones and, you know, heading up to McDonald's and getting their information, and then basically being offline after that. So we do we are aware that there are pockets of people that, you know, for a variety of reasons, do not own a smartphone, will never own a smartphone, do not have any mobile connectivity. And, you know, we know that each year that goes by in the United States, smartphone ownership is going up, but we don't want those people to be left behind. And that's why I represent just the emergency app, but our community preparedness team at national headquarters, my colleagues, they do presentations where they go out in the communities and they do presentations on, you know, emergency essentials, how to prepare for wildfire, how to prepare for hurricane. They do those free of charge. Usually they're at community rec centers or public libraries, things like that. Those are really focused on at-risk communities. We also have that is more like a presentation style. We also do, my colleague at our community preparedness team does in-home visits. So in-home visits in at-risk neighborhoods all over the United States, where we actually go in and teach people about home fire safety, install free smoke alarms, and then usually one additional hazard. So usually we'll take a hazard that's you know, likely in that area and review them some basics about how they can stay safe. So yeah, it's not a one size fits all. And until we get, you know, mobile connectivity around the nation, it is not a one size fits all. That's why we have these different sort of components and streams of activity at the American Red Cross for community preparedness in particular.
Thank you, Liz. Jan, did you have any thoughts on the digital divide, folks without smartphones?
Well, I would hope that the government would continue to also partner with private industry, private businesses to get as much internet access for people as possible across the country. But also there are people, there are seniors, and I'm a senior now, but I do have a smartphone and I know how to use a smartphone. But there are people, not just seniors, but others who don't have that and have never used it and don't really know how. And somehow you've got to figure out how to reach them, whether that's through the volunteer agencies that visit seniors in their homes, mobile meals, other kinds of organizations that may know of people that are more in their homes and may not come out into community centers as much. So they're maybe harder to reach in terms of that information. So being able to partner with those organizations, partner with senior centers and other senior organizations. I know for sure that for the Spanish speaking community and other language access communities, that presenting in their native language at a trusted organization that they go to is incredibly important, because you cannot just kind of have a big meeting at the Coliseum and expect folks to come and trust you and be able to get there. And so there's just, it's kind of a multimodal approach, I would say. And I just wanted to put in one other plug, which is obviously reach out to your community organizations, but also understand that almost all of these entities have an ADA coordinator and a Title VI coordinator within your organizations. Reach out to those people. Those are people that are going to often know people in the community, and will be able to help you from the inside and not just the outside. And often we hear that emergency managers don't know that they even have an ADA coordinator as part of their organization. And that is really, really important to know that they have an ADA coordinator.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. Just looking at the chat here or the Q&A, somebody says many of these app solutions are created by people who do not have the disability they are, quote, solving. Therefore, it ends up being a solution looking for a problem. And I'm going to respond to this because I'm very grateful to work for an amazing university that has an amazing College of Engineering. And I will put my email address in the chat. And anybody who who's out there saying, I have this disability and I really wish that there were an app that did this or did that. I have access to all of these amazing faculty, and we have amazing students, and they're always looking for problems to solve. So please do not be shy and reach out, and more than happy to get some ideas together. Maybe we can create some kind of a hackathon with students, get people thinking about app development. There are always new problems to solve, and happy to put that out there. Somebody else in the Q&A was asking about cultural competency, and how do we make sure that our trainings and our outreach efforts reflect cultural competency. Angel, I think that sounds like something that's up your alley. How do you think about cultural competency?
Yeah. Well, one of the great things is the communication. So when it comes to your messaging, that's one of the real reasons why we're kind of like pushing the plain language is we do come across like, translation. Now we have translations online and things like that translate the pages, translate the documents for you as well. Some do that. But one of the, like, I like to say, like, if you're speaking to someone and you're saying, I am speaking to you. And to translate that, it might not translate the best way as if you were to say, I talk to you. And you're saying the exact same thing, I talk to you, but it's shorter and more easier to translate. So I think there's a cultural evidence when people think, hey, this is accessible as it's gonna be. And it's like a whole, pamphlet, but it's a lot of information. And it could just be simplified into bullet points and even shortened to like maybe just one little message. And it doesn't come until when you're like trying to post it online or something that you make it shorter and so much easier to spread that you're like, why do we have this whole, this whole entire page of describing it when it could have been simplified to this. So definitely, I think that there is a cultural competence and it's changing, and technology is changing us as well. So I do think that definitely it's adapting, and hopefully we're moving to the right way of things moving forward. So that's a good thing. And it's all about being knowledgeable too, like, learning about these things, and so definitely take trainings if you can.
Thank you. I think your trainings are going to be pretty full in the near future. Liz, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, we are blessed to have 2 native Spanish speakers on my team. They are just phenomenal in making sure that they vet our translated content, our prepared content, what's in the app, to make sure that it hits the right tone, that it is friendly and empowering, not scary. So that's been just phenomenal for cultural competence for us. As we did we learned from our users with cognitive disabilities during the inclusive design study that they really prefer digital illustrations. And we had the opportunity to create 250 custom digital illustrations for the app. They're not published yet. They just completed the final batch. But in each one of those illustrations, we tried to provide a variety of people, variety of, show different races, ethnicities, show people with disabilities in doing sort of in leadership roles and things like that. So each one of those images went through at least 3 or 4 different iterations, right? Just to think about what you're seeing and making sure that it reflects the whole community that you're trying to serve was indeed challenging. And, we had to go back to the vendor a couple times and be like, no, didn't get it. You didn't get it quite. And it's always front of mind. But, you know, as we look to, we're always keeping things like that in mind, especially cultural competency related to, if there's any, you know, I think one of the key things is like candle safety, right? So, you know, if you look at our home fire module, it's like, don't use candles, right? Don't use candles, they can cause home fires, right? But some people, for religious reasons, candles are important to their religious tradition, right? The lighting of the candle, the, you know, all that thing. So, you know, you can put a caveat that says, if you must use a candle, you know, blow it out before you leave the room, right? Don't let it go. So, you know, you're constantly trying to think about how your content and how your content needs to be received by as many folks and as many different sort of ethnic groups and religious groups as possible, and so that they see themselves in it. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be something that they see, oh, those guys do that, but I do this, right? But we see themselves in it. So we're always focusing on trying to meet that mark. You know, in the future, we're only available in English and Spanish right now. And, you know, we're designed with accessibility in mind. We try to really do learn from people with disabilities and how to ways to improve the app through these inclusive design studies. They're very targeted, but we have a long way to go. We want to improve, and this coming year, we're going to be doing more of those. In the future, I hope that we can integrate, and I hope that, as Noah was saying, and as Angel was saying, you know, in the future, everyone has a right to this information. Everyone has a right to prepare. Our country is multicultural. We should be available to provide this information in a variety of languages. And that's my goal. That's my North Star. I hope we can integrate more languages into the emergency app so we can reach more language pockets. And you know, it is challenging because it's, you know, high to, you know, to get it in English and Spanish is one thing. And I think that in the next couple of years, we'll be able to move the needle on the language pockets in the United States, because everyone really does. This is not state secrets. You have a right to know how to prepare for some disaster that's going to be likely in your community. You have a right to free weather maps so you can stay up to date. Why should you be upselled? Why should you be upselled on this? You have a right to receive NOAA weather alerts issued from the national government. You have a right to be kept up to date about these storms. And after a disaster, you have a right to know if there's disaster services offered from the American Red Cross. You have a right to this information. We are here to help people. So we really do want to push the envelope on that. And I'll be battling it out. I'll be battling. Thanks.
My vote. Jan.
Yeah, so Elizabeth for president, right? So anyway, I just wanted to say that in terms of plain language, I just wanted to put in the chat, we have tried very hard, although we certainly would welcome any feedback, to make our website plain language, and also to put images of people with disabilities of different races and LGBTQ plus. And you know, we've tried to be very, very inclusive about our information on our website. And again, if anybody finds anything that they want to give us feedback on, we would welcome that. But I'm just going to put in the chat how to contact us by email at ADA Pacific, and also our web address, so that people can go and look at that and explore information about the ADA and how to reach us, and hopefully also sign up for our newsletters and our email blasts if they're able to do that.
Super. Thank you so much, Jan. We've got our 10-minute warning. I'm just going through the Q&A. Somebody noted it's important to mention that Centers for Independent Living are disability-led, ran by and for people with disabilities, which were created in light of our deinstitutionalization independent living movement. So I just wanted to honor that. The chat or the Q&A has been incredibly busy. Thank you so much for your engagement. So many people have shared resources, and so we will be compiling those, and everyone will get, you know, we'll get a list of, you know, a lot of links and some of the issues that have been raised in here. We'll do our best to answer any questions that were not answered. RAVE stands for, Noah, do you want to take that one? What does RAVE stand for?
It's kind of like a running joke. No one's really sure. The company started in support of institutes of higher education, actually prior to the Virginia Tech shooting, prior to the advent of smartphones and apps. And it was really a technology to equip college administration and registrars' offices with communicating with the student body. And so honestly, I think it was just a cool name that our founders thought of that would grab students' attentions, and that's literally all there is to it.
So, and they provide emergency notification system.
Right.
Alerts, phone calls, digital signage, all that stuff. It can connect to lots of different things. There was a point in here in the Q&A about rural communities and how is it different communicating to rural communities generally, and then, people with access and functional needs. I don't know who would like to take that one.
I mean, I'll take a very brief stab at it. I think similar to my response when areas that do have better coverage from an infrastructure perspective are without. Many rural communities are without on a regular basis or with less on a regular basis. So again, just building community resilience is key. And I mean, remember, it's only been recent that we've had access to this technology, right? Surely there are folks around who've been doing this long enough that know how to engage with the community in the absence of technology or with limited technology. I think there were also a couple of good call outs in the Q&A about things like Alert FM and FM radio and other modes of communication that are far more prevalent, might not provide all of the rich features that some of the newer technologies do, but they exist, right? So again, that's part of a multimodal messaging approach.
Yeah, that's really great information. And ham radio, also for people who have ham radios, and a disaster can be also really life-saving. And just as the people in Paradise, California found out, which is a, rural area, you need to be able to get to the rural areas. And again, a shout out for Centers for Independent Living, which often serve, a variety. They serve urban and rural areas. Senior centers, a lot of senior organizations serve urban and rural areas. So make sure you're in touch with those community-based organizations. Centers for Independent Living, yes, by and for people with disabilities. I was the executive director of the Berkeley Center for Independent Living for 10 years before coming to the ADA Center. So I know Centers for Independent Living very well, and they're critical. But there are so many organizations that serve both rural and urban areas that emergency managers should know about and contract with and be in touch with. And don't know people during the disaster, know people before the disaster, and then hopefully during and after the next disaster.
Super helpful, Jan, and I do stand corrected. I'm reminded that geographically isolated is far beyond rural and even beyond remote, according to FEMA. So thank you very much to the person who commented that. And, again, it goes to that idea of resiliency and preparedness. Let's see here. I'm just going through the Q&A. Liz mentioned weather alerts. Someone wanted to let everyone know that there's work being done as we speak to enable wireless emergency alerts to be provided in ASL. So very good news. So much engagement, so much in the Q&A. We will be compiling all of this and we'll be providing resources afterwards. I don't know, any of our panelists have closing comments? Noah?
So I want to clarify, when I was speaking earlier in the session about enhanced alerting and our partnership with Cal OES, just because some of the language in the Q&A still refers to the initiative as an AFN registry. It's very nuanced, but I do want to stress and underscore that this is not an AFN registry. Cal OES's Office of Access and Functional Needs is explicit in its position on not endorsing or promoting an AFN registry. So really that was kind of a lot of the motivation behind partnering with the community and addressing those elements of concern, not just for Cal OES, but more importantly, members of the community, addressing concerns associated with a registry to then evolve this thing into enhanced alerting. And it may still, again, feel like a registry, but through our communication about it, the technology that powers it, the way we approach it, at least Cal OES is comfortable that it is not a registry. So I do want to stress that. And perhaps I didn't articulate that well enough earlier.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. And anybody else? We've got the 3-minute warning, so.
Well, just to say thank you again for inviting us to this. It is incredibly important that we reach out to the disability community, to all AFN communities, to the emergency management and preparedness community. It's just critical that we talk to each other, that we communicate with each other. And I don't think there's been enough of that. So this symposium is really, really critically important for that. And, please do use your ADA centers, your ADA national network also across the country. If you have questions about what you're required to do under the ADA, and we would encourage you to do that, and check out our website, and please think beyond yourselves. Think about what other people may need that is beyond your own experience. And then that will help you a lot in terms of reaching the community.
Liz?
Yeah, it's been such an honor to be here and share with you. Our app is pretty new from May 2022, where we launched. Our mode is continuous improvement. So I'm every year we're doing ways to improve this thing. Our North Stars to make sure that everyone has access to information. I'm going to be attending the sessions. I'm taking furious notes, and I'm just learning so much from all of you. I did put my email into the chat to share with everybody. Love to be in contact with anybody on the call on ways that you think we can improve. I'm just so appreciative to the panelists, to Vance and Anne Marie. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. And Angel.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm proud to be here. It was a pleasure being alongside you all. I feel like I learned a lot throughout this, definitely throughout this panel. And I do want to say thank you to all the interpreters that are joining us today to make this accessible, to make this symposium as accessible as possible to reach the most amount of people. Thank you all for your hard work. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and share the best, a little bit of insight of the trainings, but, to really get going on those best practices and using those best practices to make information accessible.
And I would say ditto to everything my co-panelists said, but also an acknowledgement and appreciation for you, Anne Marie, for helping draw out the insights from this amazing panel. I too learned a lot. Yeah,
you did a great job, and thank you to Cal OES for being Cal OES and the Office of Access and Functional Needs. So thank you to you as well. Yes, Anne Marie.
Thank you. I'm humbled by this panel. I also learned a lot. And with that, thank you, Vance. We'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much, panel. That was fantastic. And Anne-Marie, let me just echo what was said. That was a master class moderation. That was fantastic. Thank you. So, look, we live in a very dynamic world, and there's a lot of things happening at the same time. Our concluding speaker is an individual named Angela Rigglesworth. And Angela's fantastic. She's an educator, She also is an individual with SMA that uses a power wheelchair. And during Hurricane Harvey was directly impacted. Angela was going to share her experiences with us and talk about partnerships that are going on in Houston and in emergency management in general that are positive, things that we need to be building on, and things that we need to be looking for down the road. And then I got a text that she's been impacted now by the hurricane that just hit in Texas. So she is not going to be able to join us for right now. And so we're going to pivot instead, and we're going to bring Marie back on and ask her to pull double duty. So we're going to bring Sadie Martinez on as well. But Sadie, of course, is running the program over there in Colorado. And we're going to have a moderated sort of interview Q&A that we're going to engage with here, and that'll be our final session for today. I do just want to say real quick, it's great to be sharing the screen with both of you right now. This is the dynamic, I would say trio. I don't even want to include myself. I'll say dynamic duo that have really made so much of the symposium possible. So it's a true pleasure to work with both of you. Anne-Marie, let me turn it back over to you for another masterclass.
Well, I'm very excited about this. It's a great opportunity to get to know both of you better and share some of your knowledge and wisdom. I know everyone has been commenting in the Q&A following Vance, your comments to open the symposium up. And I think that we really got a strong sense of your commitment to inclusion. And there's a continued need for AFN specific best practices, lessons learned. You're always, and I should mention the way I met Vance was I was an emergency manager looking for guidance on inclusive active threat preparedness way back when. And nobody had any, except I found this, this guide developed by somebody named Vance Taylor out in California. And that's how I got to know Vance as a national leader, real thought leader, and producer of useful tools for emergency managers. So I'm always, I always express my deepest admiration, and it comes from a very real place. And I'm always interested what you have going on next. So do you have any new or upcoming projects, initiatives, or products that you can tell us about?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And I will say, what you've done over at NYU in terms of taking the guide that we initially created and then building on it, developing training and videos, that is just phenomenal. And I feel like every university in the country needs to do what you're doing. So I hope that they're looking at it and that they're contacting you. Really, really incredible work. Okay, yeah, so we do have some things going on in California I'm very excited to talk about. And this is one of those, I'm going to try and get it all in as short amount of time as possible. I want to talk a little bit about the guidance documents that we've got coming out. So one is, I talked in my remarks about the need to develop and the importance of developing an AFN advisory committee. This is something that we see as an absolute best practice, that every jurisdiction should have one. Every jurisdiction in California that does have one does better because they've got it in place. The number one question I think that we tend to get about AFN advisory committees is, great, I'm sold on the concept, but how do I do it? So we're creating a guide on how do you develop an AFN advisory committee. And that'll be out in the next couple months. we'll push it nationally, and hope that everybody can pick it up and use it. We developed the guide on inclusive emergency evacuation. I talked about that in my remarks. And we've got what we call an AFN library. I'll make sure that we post a link for that. But you can access these guides through that site. We also are in the final approval stage of a guide that's pretty exciting. It's for large venues. And so this is stadiums and arenas, anywhere that host a large spectator event. The idea here is that the safety and security operations aren't typically inclusive of AFN specific considerations. And so what we're doing is we're providing safety and security operators at large venues with information on how to be more inclusive and have integrated operations in a form and fashion that not only promotes safety and security, but that actually increases and enhances the overall game day or event day experience that people with access and functional needs have. I presented on it at a national conference in Phoenix, which was 120 degrees, holy smokes. But the industry, it was very well received. And so we think that that's something that Major League Baseball, the NBA, all the leagues in concert will use. And so what we'll see is in hopefully not too long a time, people with access and functional needs actually having better experiences and safer experiences when they go to those events. In terms of courses, we just updated our G197 course. That's on integrated emergency plans. The basic history there is we created this course many years ago. FEMA did sort of like a copy paste, put it out as L197. That course is not being offered nationally. And so what we've done now is that, hey, any state that wants to use California's G197 course can have it. And so we've shared it with Colorado and Washington and Oregon. We've shared it with Nevada. We've shared it. We're sharing it with New York. We're sharing it with other states. And so we are more than happy to give you what we have. Make whatever edits are appropriate for your state. Swap out the logos. And go forth and do great things with it. So we'll share that with anybody. We've got 3 training courses that are going online on communication, sheltering, and transportation. We just completed a CERT module. That's an AFN specific CERT module. So you're going to see that roll out nationally. And we've of course got our 3 accessible document training courses. Angel was talking about that. I loved that there's so much interest in the chat. Please register for those courses. They're for you. They're for CBOs, for emergency managers. They are free, and we will happily continue to provide them 3 times a month. And the last one is, of course, the social media course, which is still in the development process, but we will make that available to everybody as well. So sorry, a little bit longer than probably I should have gone on for, but lots of stuff, and we're sharing with everybody.
No, it's fabulous. And I think, the fact that you are willing to share, materials, you're putting guidance out there, for everyone to use, it's so powerful. We learn from each other. And, Sadie is a fabulous person to have on, in this panel. because Sadie is all about collaboration too, and sharing information, bringing us forward. Sadie, some of the folks on here may not know who you are or may not be familiar with what you do. Would you mind, introducing yourself and sharing, what is your secret to collaboration? Because that's what you do. You bring people together amazingly.
Hi, this is Sadie. I'm Access and Functional Needs Coordinator here at the State of Colorado's Office of Emergency Management. Been here about 5.5 years. Who I am here is I'm actually almost like Vance. Nobody could be like Vance, but I try to be. So what my goal is trying to be Vance in training. So that's what I do here. But seriously, my position was designed to start helping access and functional needs inclusion in whole community inclusion planning. And a lot of times we're like, what does that even mean? And then when I first got into this position, it was like, what is even AFN? I used to know it as Armed Force Network because I was an Army brat at one point. And so I was like, I don't even understand all these labels that are throwing to me. And I was like, and what about those people who don't even identify in those labels? So what I started doing was seeking to understand. And in order to seek to understand, I had to start collaborating and going into those uncomfortable conversations to be able to ask my counterparts. I used to work for a Center for Independent Living. And so I would every time I would walk into an emergency management training or meeting, I was looked at as, oh my goodness, the ADA police is coming in. And I was like, ooh, why is that the idea? Why am I considered like it's a bad thing? ADA's been around for 34 years this year. I think it's been such a great opportunity for inclusion and being able to help others understand what it looks like to be disability included. And so that is helpful. That is helpful with that. Sorry, we just got something from the captioner. Apologies, I'm pausing for just a second. Captioner, is there a problem?
No, we're good.
Alrighty, apologies, back to pause. Now I'm gonna hit play again. So it made me start trying to understand, well, why is this message coming up? What is happening that's the problem? And so I start looking for solutions. I'm all about being a yes and person versus a yes but person. And so it started asking and trying to eat away at the layers of why was the message that way? Well, it comes from a bunch of good people just not knowing or understanding what the message is supposed to be conveyed there. So being able to ask the questions to stakeholders and people with lived experience from disability advocates and also ADA coordinators to better understand how do you view emergency management, and emergency managers, how do you view people with disabilities? Well, we're just scared. At first, it felt like everybody was, I'm just scared that I'm going to break the law and I'm going to get sued. And it was like, okay, why are you feeling that way? So being able to take time to sync up, to really ask some better questions to help break away the stigmas that might be associated with that. Well, I didn't do that only as when I worked for the Center for Independent Living. When I came to the Office of Emergency Management, I had to also sit with my counterparts that were in other sections in our Office of Emergency Management, such as our operations section, our response section, mitigation, recovery, and I sit in the plan section. And so being able to see how they viewed access and functional needs. And I'll be honest, at the beginning, they thought I was the ADA coordinator. And I was there to tell them what they were doing wrong. And I said, ooh, yikes, we need to break that. And all of us just need to learn how to do it right and how to get it right. And so with the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, they do a monthly or a weekly meeting that I would attend, so I could also understand what our disability advocates and champions across the nation are looking at when disasters happen. And then what is some of this historical and events of things that have happened, and what are these lessons learned? If they're lessons learned, why aren't they changed already? So thank goodness I also mentored with disability champions such as June Isaac Hales, where I asked her, hey, help me better understand what you're doing, and help me better see how we do lessons learned. And she gave me great advice. Stop calling it lessons learned. Start putting those lessons learned into lessons applied. So what does that mean? So that made me go down the journey, and in that collaboration, I went with my counterparts at other state agencies, such as our Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response that sits in our Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And I mentored and thought partnered with my counterpart there, Amy Both-Siebert, who will be on a panel tomorrow. And she helped me as I'm trying to seek to understand. She's been doing whole community inclusion and emergency management for 14 years now. And when I first met her, it was about 7 years ago. And so she already had lessons learned that she was putting into lessons applied. And I was able to collaborate with her to start helping us as we come together with our, we have an access and functional needs subcommittee that helps guide this program to help with all this. Well, I didn't only do that. I went to go visit Vance over in California to find out hey, Vance, you're this hero in this field. I want to learn what you're doing, and how can I learn from you and be able to share out as well? And so I have the same mantra as Vance. We share big time. And so COVID happened, and in COVID, all the other states now started wanting to do. We're a bunch of good people trying to do good things. We just needed to learn what we didn't know because we didn't know. And what we didn't want to start from scratch and repeat history over and over again. And this is where those lessons applied came in. So we went and started a national monthly meeting where we bring all of our state level access and functional needs partners, and some local levels. A lot of our big city access and functional needs coordinators will also attend that, where we can learn from each other. We could also ask each other, what are some of our resource needs? What are our training needs? This is where we started learning about that California had a G197 integrating access and functional needs in emergency planning, and being able to say, hey, we need that. How can we have a shared language and a shared message so that we're not trying to start undermining each other's message? And so there's where we started replicating that. Now we're funded a little bit different. And so our trainings, we are able to offer it outside of Colorado. And if people want, if we have in-person people who want to come to our state, they're welcome to join us. They just have to have their own funding to get there. But we always offer it also hybrid. So if we're offering it in person, we do offer it virtually as well, to allow our out-of-state partners, if they're wanting to start up their programs in their area, they at least have some more thought partners. They have some syncing, some collaboration that's happening, and they don't have to start it from scratch again. And so we've done those kind of opportunities, and there's where the collaboration came from. It really is being a seek to understand. When something comes to me in a negative format or in a problem format, I start going, what's the solution? There has to be a solution, because I truly believe we all believe, especially in emergency management, we all want to save life and property. And so that's where some of those areas of collaboration come into it. And thank you to my thought partners and my mentors and those who take the time to sit down and talk with me to help me better understand. And you know what, Anne-Marie, I forgot to do your shout out. I actually joined the International Association for Emergency Management, the IAEM. Access and Whole Community Inclusion Caucus, and you were vice chair at the time. And in that opportunity, I was able to learn from your leadership and your predecessor chair at the time a little bit more information and how we could also collaborate, even bring in today this symposium. Vance had this great idea about 3 years ago and said, hey, Sadie, we need to do this. And I was like, you're right. And we need to also bring on some of our other champions that are trying to do the same thing, that we could keep reaching across the nation and keep working together. And so I would say that those are where it is. And thank you for those thought partners, those mentors and collaborators.
Thank you, Sadie. Vance, I just got a 10-minute warning, so this is phenomenal. I'm going to ask you the most important, question. Can you tell us about what drew you to this work and what keeps you going? And I will mention in the Q&A for the last panel, somebody said, how do we get all emergency managers to care about inclusion? And I think that's somehow connected to this last question. What motivates you? What keeps you going?
Yeah, good question. So, I have lived experience with a disability. And there have been different times in my life where there have been barriers to communication or transportation, but barriers to physical access to services that everybody should have, right? Services that people on my left and people on my right were all able to access, but I couldn't. And it just feels terrible. I was in a hotel yesterday. I was trying to get to the airport. There was one taxi cab company that said, we'll provide you with a wheelchair accessible taxi. And then they just didn't show up. So all around the hotel, people were just hopping in and out of cabs. But not me. I didn't have a way to get home. And so there was a mad dash scramble. Amazingly, it worked out because the plane was delayed. But otherwise, I would have been stuck in Phoenix. So I know what it feels like to be marginalized in that way. Now, let me just kind of back up just a little bit real quick and say, I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for 2 different members of Congress. I got very deeply involved in Homeland Security, emergency management. For whatever reason, those issues called to me. I saw very early on that within each of those areas, there were gaps in the way people with disabilities or anybody identifying with an access or functional need is treated or addressed. And so when the opportunity came to be appointed in this position in California, I viewed it as a culmination of everything I had done educationally, because I've got a master's in Homeland Security, everything I've done professionally, because I've worked on legislation and policy, and the culmination of my personal life experiences. The other thing is, Emery, the reality for me is that so many of my friends that I grew up with who had similar disabilities as me have passed away. And look, just to be very frank, I don't know why they passed away and I didn't. But I'm here and they're not, which means I have a responsibility to advocate. I have a responsibility because I have a voice to use that voice. I have a responsibility because a lot of times I'm the only one in the room when the decisions are being made to inform those decision makers about the implications of going this way or that way for everybody outside that room that doesn't have the same platform that I have. And so Yeah, there is a very real toll, physically and emotionally, that this work has. But I feel a deep responsibility, and it motivates me. And I feel it every day, and I view it as an incredible honor and privilege. And so I'll continue to push. And being able to partner with wonderful people, being able to see this work evolve, and knowing that the work that's happening isn't just creating a cultural shift that improves access, but that the result of that is a decrease in human suffering, a decrease in lives lost, is motivation that drives me every day. So that's why I feel it the way I do, and then that's why I do what I do. So I'm grateful to be partnered up with you and others on this mission.
I really don't know. You're actually like, choking me up here. It's one of those, this is a great opportunity because what we're doing, and I think a lot of people have taken the time to attend this webinar, people who are engaged in their own ways in inclusion and really seeking to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, because people do matter. So, that's, you're truly inspiring us all, because we know what we do does matter. What we don't do, we can have people left out. We don't want that. The Q&A, I'm getting time warnings from Tim. Thank you, Tim. The Q&A is full of requests for links to access all of the great resources that you've developed, Vance, and which is fabulous. Again, expanding the reach. And I see that Tim has added Colorado's monthly CMIST resource meeting. Sadie is amazing. Again, expanding access to important, potentially life-saving resources. So, every little bit, of effort makes a difference. Getting emergency managers involved. The question from the previous panel was, how do we get more, preaching to the choir? We've got, so many who just don't know what they don't know. And again, letting folks know, we will be sending out a packet of information following this symposium, forwarding that information, making people aware that, if they didn't attend this year, they can attend next year, and they can follow the good work that Vance is doing and Sadie's doing, and then that others are doing nationally. So I think, Vance, do you want to?
Yes. So thank you again for moderating. Appreciate that. Just a couple of really quick points, and we'll adjourn for the day. But we're going to pick up again tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific. I want to thank the interpreters and translators. Appreciate the assistance with captioning. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank the moderator. I want to thank everybody. I know that, sometimes depending on whoever's on the screen, that's the person that gets the credit. But the reality is there's just so many teams, right? There's so many people that are doing this work on this mission. What a genuine honor and privilege it is to be associated with everybody and gathered here. Please join us tomorrow. We will have a fantastic program. Sadie's going to give us a keynote. We've also got a terrific panel. Then we've got Andrew Burke joining us as well. So be safe, be well, and know that these resources are going to be sent out to everybody. All the links, all the questions, they'll all be provided, I promise. And we'll see you tomorrow, bright and early, for another great day.